Welcome to the part 2. The Egyptian victory over the Hyksos marked the beginning of a new chapter. The kingdom that emerged was no longer satisfied with simply surviving. It wanted to dominate. The rulers of this new era understood an important lesson. If foreign armies could invade Egypt once, they could do it again. The only way to guarantee security was to push Egypt's borders farther than ever before. This was the beginning of the New Kingdom, the most powerful period in ancient Egyptian history. Leading this transformation was a series of remarkable pharaohs who turned Egypt from a wealthy kingdom into a true empire. Among the greatest was Thutmose III, often called the Napoleon of ancient Egypt. Thutmose III spent much of his reign leading military campaigns across the Near East. He commanded disciplined armies equipped with fast-moving chariots, skilled archers, and experienced infantry. His first major challenge came when several rebellious city-states united against Egypt near the city of Megiddo. Most commanders chose the safest route to the battlefield. Thutmose chose the most dangerous. Instead of taking the wide roads that everyone expected, he marched his entire army through a narrow mountain pass where an ambush could have destroyed them. It was a gamble. If the enemy had discovered his plan, Egypt's army might have been wiped out before the battle even began. But the risk paid off. The Egyptian army emerged unexpectedly behind enemy lines, catching the coalition completely off guard. The victory at Megiddo became one of the earliest battles in history to be described in remarkable detail. It also demonstrated the importance of surprise, speed, and decisive leadership. Over the next 2 decades, Thutmose III led campaign after campaign, extending Egyptian influence deep into modern-day Syria and beyond the Euphrates River. Never before had Egypt controlled so much territory. Conquered kingdoms paid tribute in gold, silver, precious stones, livestock, timber, and exotic goods. Every victory brought new wealth back to the Nile. Egypt had become one of the world's first great superpowers. Yet military strength was only one reason for its success. The empire also became a center of diplomacy. Foreign rulers exchanged gifts with the pharaoh, arranged royal marriages, and signed agreements to maintain peace. Egyptian influence spread not only through conquest, but also through trade, culture, and political alliances. Its temples reflected this growing confidence. Across the kingdom, enormous construction projects transformed the landscape. Massive columns reached toward the sky. Towering statues guarded temple entrances. Walls were covered with detailed carvings, celebrating victories, religious ceremonies, and the achievements of each pharaoh. One of the most magnificent religious complexes ever built was the Karnak Temple Complex. Generation after generation added new halls, obelisks, courtyards, and shrines, creating a temple city unlike anything else in the ancient world. Nearby stood the beautiful Luxor Temple, connected to Karnak by a grand avenue lined with hundreds of stone sphinxes. These monuments were more than architectural masterpieces. They were symbols of an empire at the height of its power. The pharaoh who ruled Egypt was no longer viewed as simply the king of the Nile. He was regarded as one of the most powerful rulers on earth. But while Egypt celebrated its victories abroad, another extraordinary ruler was about to reshape the kingdom from within. Unlike the great conquerors who came before, this pharaoh would challenge centuries of religious tradition, divide the nation, and leave behind one of history's greatest mysteries. His revolution would change ancient Egypt forever. At the height of Egypt's power, when its armies were victorious and its temples stretched across the Nile Valley, a young pharaoh took the throne who would challenge nearly everything his people believed. His name was Amenhotep IV. At first, his reign appeared no different from those before him, but within a few years, he began making decisions that shocked the entire kingdom. For nearly 2,000 years, Egyptians had worshipped hundreds of gods and goddesses. Great temples honored deities like Ra, Osiris, Isis, Horus, and Amun. Their priests held enormous wealth and influence, and religion shaped every aspect of daily life. Amenhotep IV wanted to change all of it. He declared that one god should stand above all others. That god was Aten, represented by the sun's radiant disk. To symbolize this dramatic transformation, The pharaoh even changed his own name. Amenhotep IV became Akhenaten, meaning effective for Aten. It was one of the boldest religious revolutions in ancient history. Temples, dedicated to other gods, were closed. Their wealth was seized. Many images and names of traditional gods were removed from monuments. The powerful priests of Amun, who had dominated Egyptian religion for generations, suddenly found themselves stripped of much of their authority. Akhenaten didn't stop there. He abandoned Egypt's traditional capital and ordered the construction of an entirely new city in the desert. Known today as Amarna, it was built specifically to honor Aten and serve as the center of his new religious vision. Palaces, temples, homes, and government buildings rose from the desert with astonishing speed. For a brief moment, it seemed as though Egypt itself was being reinvented. The royal family also appeared unlike any before them. Instead of stiff, formal portraits, artists began creating surprisingly natural scenes. Akhenaten, his famous queen Nefertiti, and their daughters were shown eating together, embracing one another, and enjoying everyday family life. This artistic style was revolutionary. Faces became more realistic. Bodies appeared less idealized. Emotion replaced perfection. No other period of Egyptian history looked quite like it. Among all these remarkable figures, none became more famous than Nefertiti. Her elegant limestone bust, discovered thousands of years later, remains one of the most recognizable works of art from the ancient world. Even today, her image symbolizes the beauty and sophistication of ancient Egypt. Yet beneath the surface, serious problems were growing. Many Egyptians refused to abandon the gods their families had worshipped for generations. The priesthood deeply resented the loss of its power. Meanwhile, Egypt's foreign empire demanded constant attention. As Akhenaten focused on religious reforms, some distant territories began slipping from Egyptian control. When Akhenaten died after a relatively short reign, his revolution quickly began to unravel. His successors restored the old religion. The temples reopened. The traditional gods returned. The capital moved back. Many of Akhenaten's monuments were dismantled, and later rulers even attempted to erase his name from history. For centuries, it almost worked. Then another young pharaoh inherited the throne. He was only a child. His reign lasted less than a decade. He won no famous battles. He built no colossal monuments. Yet thousands of years later, he would become the most famous pharaoh in the world. His name was Tutankhamun. Few could have imagined that the greatest treasure of ancient Egypt would remain hidden beneath the sands for more than 3,000 years, waiting for a discovery that would captivate the entire modern world. When Tutankhamun became pharaoh, he was probably no more than 9 years old. He was far too young to rule alone. Experienced advisors guided the kingdom while the young king grew up. But even as a child, Tutankhamun became the symbol of Egypt's return to tradition. One of his first decisions was to abandon the religious revolution of Akhenaten. The old temples reopened. The gods returned. The priests regained their influence. Even the young king changed his name. Originally called Tutankhaten in honor of Aten, he became Tutankhamun, honoring Amun, one of Egypt's most important gods. It was a clear message. Egypt had returned to its ancient beliefs. Although Tutankhamun ruled for only about 9 years, his reign helped restore stability after decades of political and religious turmoil. Then, unexpectedly, he died. He was only around 18 or 19 years old. Exactly how he died remains one of history's greatest mysteries. Some researchers believe illness weakened him. Others suggest complications from injuries. Modern scans have revealed health problems that may have resulted from generations of royal intermarriage, but no single explanation has been universally accepted. Because his death came so suddenly, his burial was surprisingly modest for a pharaoh. Instead of an enormous pyramid or vast royal complex, Tutankhamun was placed inside a relatively small tomb in the Valley of the Kings. Ironically, that decision changed history. Over the centuries, many royal tombs were discovered and looted by grave robbers searching for gold and precious treasures. Tutankhamun's tomb, however, remained hidden beneath layers of rock and sand. For more than 3,000 years, it lay almost completely untouched. Then, in 1922, British archaeologist Howard Carter made one of the greatest discoveries in archaeological history. After years of searching, Carter uncovered a sealed staircase leading deep beneath the desert floor. When he finally peered through a small opening into the burial chamber, he was asked if he could see anything. His famous reply has become legendary. Yes, wonderful things. Inside the tomb were more than 5,000 objects. Golden chariots, jewelry, furniture, weapons, statues, clothing, musical instruments, food prepared for the afterlife, and at the center rested one of the most famous artifacts ever discovered, Tutankhamun's solid gold funerary mask. Weighing over 10 kilograms, the mask displayed extraordinary craftsmanship, with delicate inlays of blue glass and precious stones forming the face of the young king. It quickly became the symbol of ancient Egypt itself. The discovery transformed archaeology. For the first time, historians could study a royal Egyptian tomb almost exactly as it had been left over 3,000 years earlier. The treasures revealed astonishing details about Egyptian art, religion, technology, and daily life. But, while Tutankhamun became the world's most famous pharaoh, many historians believe another ruler deserves the title of Egypt's greatest king. That ruler was Ramesses II. Known to history as Ramses the Great, he ruled for more than 66 years. During his reign, Egypt reached another peak of power and prosperity. He led military campaigns across the Near East, constructed enormous temples, raised colossal statues of himself throughout the kingdom, and commissioned more monuments than almost any other pharaoh. Among his greatest achievements was the magnificent Abu Simbel temples. Carved directly into a mountainside, 4 gigantic seated statues of Ramses guarded the entrance. Even today, visitors stand beneath these towering figures in awe, just as ancient travelers did more than 3,000 years ago. Ramses also fought one of history's most famous battles, the Battle of Kadesh. Although both sides claimed victory, neither achieved a decisive result. Instead of continuing endless war, Egypt and the Hittite Empire reached an agreement that became one of the earliest known peace treaties in recorded history. It was a remarkable moment. One of humanity's oldest civilizations had shown that diplomacy could sometimes achieve what war could not. But despite its military strength, magnificent temples, and the legendary rulers, Egypt's greatest days were slowly coming to an end. A new wave of powerful empires was rising beyond the horizon, and this time, ancient Egypt would struggle to hold back the tide of history. No empire lasts forever. For centuries, ancient Egypt had stood as one of the richest and most powerful civilizations on earth. Its armies had conquered distant lands, its temples towered above the Nile, and its pharaohs ruled like living gods. But history has a way of changing even the mightiest kingdoms. After the reign of Ramses II, Egypt began a slow decline. The empire had become enormous, making it increasingly difficult to defend its borders. Maintaining large armies, building massive monuments, and supporting countless temples placed a heavy burden on the kingdom's resources. At the same time, powerful priests gained more influence than ever before. The temples owned vast amounts of land, controlled enormous wealth, and employed thousands of workers. In some regions, the high priests became almost as powerful as the pharaoh himself. Once again, authority became divided. As central power weakened, foreign enemies recognized an opportunity. New kingdoms rose across the ancient world. Among the first were the Neo-Assyrian Empire, whose armies were unlike anything Egypt had faced before. They mastered siege warfare, iron weapons, and disciplined military tactics that overwhelmed many of the great civilizations of the Near East. In 601 BC, the Assyrians invaded Egypt. Their armies captured important cities and forced the pharaoh to retreat. Although Egyptian rulers briefly regained control, the kingdom never fully recovered its former strength. Soon, another empire arrived. The Achaemenid Empire, led by Cambyses II, conquered Egypt in 525 BC. For the first time in centuries, Egypt became a province ruled by a foreign empire. The pharaohs who had once commanded the ancient world were replaced by Persian governors. Yet Egypt's story was far from over. Nearly 200 years later, a young Macedonian king crossed into Egypt during his campaign against Persia. His name was Alexander the Great. Unlike earlier conquerors, Alexander was welcomed by many Egyptians as a liberator. He respected Egyptian traditions, honored their gods, and was declared pharaoh soon after entering the country. During his brief stay, he founded a new city on the Mediterranean coast. That city was Alexandria, even Nachtia Faridondria. It would soon become one of the greatest centers of learning in the ancient world. After Alexander's death in 323 BC, his empire was divided among his generals. Egypt came under the rule of Ptolemy the Soter, beginning the Ptolemaic dynasty. Although the rulers of this dynasty were Greek by origin, they adopted many Egyptian traditions. They presented themselves as pharaohs, built magnificent temples, and blended Greek and Egyptian cultures into a unique civilization. Alexandria flourished during this period. Its famous Library of Alexandria attracted scholars from across the known world. Thousands of scrolls filled its shelves. Scientists studied mathematics, astronomy, medicine, geography, and philosophy. Knowledge from Egypt, Greece, Persia, and many other civilizations came together in one extraordinary city. It became the intellectual capital of the ancient world. But while Alexandria reached new heights, political struggles within the royal family weakened the kingdom. The final ruler of the Ptolemaic dynasty would become one of the most famous women in history. Her name was Cleopatra the Seventh Philopator. Intelligent, highly educated, and fluent in multiple languages, Cleopatra was far more than the legendary beauty portrayed in later stories. She was a determined ruler, fighting to preserve Egypt's independence during one of history's most dangerous moments. Unfortunately, an even greater power had already begun to dominate the Mediterranean. That power was Rome. The fate of ancient Egypt now rested on a struggle that would decide the future of the entire ancient world.